Welcome to the Let Go and Be Free podcast, a podcast for those who grew up in an alcoholic or dysfunctional family. I'm your host, Ron Vital, author of the Let Go and Be Free 100 Daily Reflections for Adult Children of Alcoholics series. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to visit letgoandbefree.com. And with that, let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This week we are going to recommit ourselves to step 10 of the 12 steps. I will go through and read the 10th step, put it through context of where we are on the journey, and then kind of talk through exactly what that step is and give some thoughts about what I think about it now, kind of re-evaluating this step as I like to do every so many years. Again, for those of you who are new to the podcast, if you do enjoy it, I ask that you please help and support. I've given the let go and be free type of attitude toward raising the funds to keep the podcast going. I will announce that, again, got to continue to pay the monthly bills to keep the podcast going. Currently, we have enough to get us through to the end of the year. And after that, we'll see what will happen. I'm going to stop stressing about it. I feel that if things are meant to be, it will work out and money will present itself when I ask for help on the podcast. And if not, then unfortunately, the podcast will need to close because I can't keep the doors open, as they say. But if you'd like to become a member, a Let Go and Be Free family member, you can become a paying subscriber on Substack. Link is in the show notes. And then you could also visit letgoandbefree.com. There are 4 different volumes of the Let Go and Be Free series. Feel free to pick that up. Every purchase that you make for a book, again, we're talking it's only a couple dollars purchase of a book. One, you're going to get 100 plus days of daily reflections, which will last you, literally 100 plus days. And the funds, the profits from that go right back into keeping the podcast going. So thank you. So let's get started. Step 10, I'm going to read it twice, as I like to do, so I can kind of focus on it. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So I'll say that again. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So step 10 obviously comes on the heels of step 9, where we were making amends with people in our lives. And I think step 10 is a really good one to kind of focus on, in the sense that we have potentially decades of learned unhealthy behavior from growing up in our families, dysfunctional families. That meant we might have been dealing with sexual abuse, there may have been domestic violence, there may have been physical violence against us, emotional abuse, all kinds of situations. And so we learned different survival patterns, how to make it through, how to navigate through the chaotic family that we grew up in. And some of those learned behaviors may have served us well when we were young, but are not serving us well as we get older. And now we're kind of scratching our heads saying, I don't understand what's wrong, and we may be looking at life from a particular point of view, and that point of view may be very narrow-minded because, again, of our upbringing. We only know what we know, and unfortunately, that may have been pain and suffering, confusion, fear of abandonment, hurt, loss, all kinds of mixed emotions. And what I've like to say is that as I've gotten older, I've gone through school and, in the sense that I've gone all the way up through graduate school, and I've never felt that I've received any type of helpful instruction on how to live in any of that schooling. Like, book learning is amazing and I love it, but I don't feel that helps you in the day-to-day of life, which I think is unfortunate. I mean, even some of the basic things, you just don't learn through school. The only class that I can think of that actually I did feel taught me anything was in college. I took an interpersonal communications class, and I felt that really helped me understand different communication styles, as well as learn my own and what was working and what wasn't working for me. But things and tools such as the 12 steps I find to be helpful because they help you kind of do a check-in on yourself on a regular basis and teach you the ways to kind of move about in your life instead of floundering and just continuing to repeat these negative, unhealthy behaviors. So first thing I want to kind of go through is I took a couple quotes that I wanted to walk through from the book, The 12 Steps for Adult Children. I will put the link in the show notes. I've done that in the past, put the link in the show notes. I purchased this book, I guess it was in the early 90s, and I see that it's still available for in print. I think it's a great purchase. I think using that book has really helped me over the course of my life. And in step 10, there's a couple bullet points that I kind of wanted to break through, kind of break out, I should say. So this one quote that I saw that I wanted to share is, "We feel safe when something is familiar to us, even though it is a negative behavior pattern." I think that's something that's really important to focus on. If all we know is from what we learned in our dysfunctional family, it eventually became something that was comfortable, our environment. It may still have been scary, but when we try to step out of the past and onto a different, way of behaving, something that would be healthier for us, it could be scary, it could be confusing, and it might also bring up lots of emotions. So sometimes you might fall back into negative behaviors just because you feel safe, you feel comfortable, you know how to handle those, instead of, well, let me learn a new way. Let me take this inventory on myself. Where was I wrong? And how do I admit that I was wrong? And how do I, fix that? Fix the behavior. Fix how I look at the world. That's really difficult to do. Another quote that stood out, which I thought was very helpful: "When old behaviors reappear, they are simply repetitions of learned patterns of behavior." And I remember this type of thought when I first started going to therapy. Again, at that point, it was decades ago, 3+ decades ago. And I remember my therapist using the, analogy of, imagine that you have like a cassette tape playing, and that cassette tape just keeps going on and on and on. Or you might say a record, the album is going on and on and on. There's grooves on that album, and your behavior patterns are the grooves. You're used to acting a certain way or reacting in a situation. When those old behavior patterns appear, it's because your neurons, what's fired up within your brain, there's a path and you're used to that. Learning a new way takes time and energy. Breaking a habit, changing how you think at something, how you don't react to something, learning new skills, it's not impossible, but it can be really difficult to do. And the last bit here that I wanted to focus on, this other bit from the book: "We victimize ourselves by allowing the past occupy our thoughts. We can let go of the past." This last one is one that I often fall prey to. And, over time, I have learned how to move beyond the past. But it is not easy. And what I mean by that is, we could be in the present moment and going through a problem, and we might think back all the things that we have done wrong or the problems that have come out of, let's say, if we're having a fight with a spouse, and all the, the settled feelings might come up about that argument that you've had. And you think about all the things that you may have done, and you start beating yourself up like, oh, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. Instead of taking responsibility for the items that you did do wrong, let that go by making an amend on it and moving forward. Often, and again, I'll speak for myself, I'll get caught in a spiral. I start thinking one negative thought, and then that creates another negative thought, and I just keep going round and round and round. And I could catastrophize the situation, thinking, oh no, it's the end of the world. No one's going to love me. Everybody abandons me. And it goes on and on and on. And that's something that I struggle with, that I have to work, on a daily basis. And that's why I do like the 12 steps, because again, especially with step 10, taking that personal inventory, I could do that every day. I don't mean that I could do it hours at a time, but you do these simple little check-ins each day. Like, hey, it's the end of the day before I go to bed. I'm lying in bed. How did today go? Or you could do it in the morning and write this down in your morning pages. How do you feel? How did yesterday go? Did you get into an argument with somebody, or did you let your own self down by falling into a behavior pattern which is unhealthy? How can you do different, moving forward? It's really important to focus on that we are not quote unquote bad. It's the behaviors that we've learned are unhealthy and are not allowing us to move forward. We have to find a way to replace unhealthy behavior patterns with healthy ones. That's not easy to do, but there are ways of doing it, and it takes time and it takes practice. And that practice is something that we learn along the way. One of the paths is learning the 12 steps, because the 12 steps are helping you, teaching you the way to go through life so that way you can live a healthier life, a happier life. But it's not the only way. There are ways, again, working with a therapist, mindfulness, focusing on yoga, focusing on learning healthier styles of communication with those around you. This all takes time and effort, and it can feel overwhelming. I know that I've been in situations where a problem will come up, I focus on the problem, and then I just get pulled down by thinking like, oh, woe is me. Why did this have to happen to me? I've suffered all this stuff in my life. It's not fair, etc., etc. And it just goes on and on and on. And that type of mentality is not going to help us move forward. It's going to keep us trapped. And we need to find a way to, again, let go of the past and move on in a way that's going to be healthy and happier for us by learning new behaviors, by changing how we act in a particular situation. And a simple example. We may be in an argument with somebody and they might say something to us that really angers us. Our normal reaction could be one of two things, just using a very simple, common example. One, it could be we get really angry back and explode on that person and start yelling and screaming, and then the escalation goes up and up and up, and both parties say things that they regret. That's a very common behavior pattern. Problem isn't solved, and it's still, everything's a mess. Or you might be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Get into an argument with someone, and instead of standing up for yourself and saying, I need this, I feel this, you clam up, repress, and deny. And your feelings, you just push them down. That's also an unhealthy behavior pattern, because then you're not able to face conflict and find ways of resolving that conflict. By always supplanting your own needs, burying them down deep, you're not going to be able to feel fulfilled in life, because you're just constantly denying and repressing. And that's also not healthy for you. Again, two simple examples. I'm not saying you do either of those, but I think they're universal enough that, you can identify with that. to move forward, when we're using something like the 12 steps with this step 10, when you do that, continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Imagine you're in an argument with someone, and let's say you repress your feelings and you bury them down. And let's say hours later, you start thinking like, hey, maybe this would be a good opportunity to think through the 10th step. How do I feel about how today went? And you go, I had this argument with my spouse, and instead of telling, him how I really feel, I buried my feelings. And I didn't stand up for what I believe in and what I feel. I'm not standing up for my own needs. And then you could say, I was wrong about that. I need to find a way to change how I can handle those feelings that come up. And that's something that takes time. But writing about it, if I were in that particular circumstance, I would then focus on writing this down in my journal. How did I feel during that argument? Instead of repressing the feelings, I would let them out through words. And I've said this before in other podcasts, but again, if you're new to the show, that does not mean that you have to write it down in a way that you might feel uncomfortable if anyone were to ever find that journal of yours. I've done this in the past. Sit at a computer, open a word processor, like Microsoft Word or even Notepad or whatever you have, and just start typing. And when you're done, you don't save it. You just delete the file and it's gone forever. You could do something similar by taking a piece of paper and writing out your thoughts and then destroying the letter. You could throw it away, symbolically, if you have like it's a safe way of like a fire pit outside or so, you put that as kindling, put the letter in the fire, etc. Symbolically, what you're doing is you're allowing your feelings to come to the surface by using words to capture, to communicate, even within yourself, how you feel. So it will resonate within you. And then you're letting those feelings go by either, again, turning the computer off and not saving the file, or tearing up the letter, throwing it in the trash, and nobody ever sees it. That way you get the privacy, the safety, and security to protect yourself if that's something that you feel like you need to do or you want to do. Again, the choice is up to you. I'm not going to tell you how you need to journal. That is your own personal path, and I see that as a sacred, agreement that you have within yourself of like, this is what I feel comfortable with. They are your feelings, your emotions, and sometimes it might be uncomfortable when those feelings get dredged up and you're not sure what to do with them. That's why, again, I think with the 12 steps, along with the Serenity Prayer, I think it's a really good match doing some of those journal writings and then feelings bubble up. This could be easier, of course. If you're working with a therapist, you can have a set time, let's say each week, where you could talk through your feelings. But if you're not seeing a therapist, you could use the adult children of alcoholic meetings to be able to share at a meeting and talk through. That's another good way to be able to share. The point of this is to come in touch with your feelings, understand how and why you tick, basically, and what might be triggered items for you, what might set you off, get you angry, get you scared. For me, if there's any, ounce of financial struggle that might come up in my life, that brings me back to a kid of fearing of like, we don't have enough money. What are we going to do? How are we going to get by? Remembering how stressed my mom was, my grandparents, and all, it just brings up a lot of past memories. And so when I focus on the present, again, bringing up and focusing on the Serenity Prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. understanding those boundaries between what is outside of my control and what is within my control. That's really helpful, because then you have a guide to be able to say, this is in my domain. This is what I can work on. If you're struggling with somebody else, you can't do anything to fix that other person, get them to admit how they feel. It is beyond your control. You let that all go. You can only focus on yourself. And I have found that to be really helpful, because when I have my own business in order, my own house, meaning me, in order, that helps me better communicate with my spouse, with my kids, coworkers, etc. If I feel unbalanced because I didn't get enough sleep, I haven't been eating right, haven't been exercising, or I've been sick, etc., there are certain, we'll call them triggers that cause a problem that could set me off. And that helps me to say, you know what, stop. Let's do an inventory today. Let me think through, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? How am I going to move forward? How am I going to fix this? And it might be like, oh, I'm really stressed out at work. I really need some time to listen to some music to be able to help calm me, or I want to do some meditation, or I want to go on a walk. Like, there are certain things that I have learned which are helpful for me. And that is writing, light exercise, could be gardening, could be cleaning around the house, listening to music, writing. There are certain things that I know work for me to help me get me back on that path of, let's not deal with the negative, unhealthy behaviors. How can I focus on the positive ones? And for me, what that translates into is having skills and tools in front of me. The skills are, I know how to write. I know how to effectively take the feelings that are going through me and communicate them, even if it's through my own, journal writing, to be able to put that on paper. And then, these tools are then the 12 steps, serenity prayer, potentially talking to a therapist, meditation, etc. So I can move forward and let some of that unhealthy behavior go, and then practice healthier behaviors. And that over time becomes the habit that you can focus on. Again, it takes time. It's not easy, but I do think that this step 10 is a good one to focus on. But getting back to that one bullet point, I'll say it again because I do think it's worth discussing. We victimize ourselves by allowing the past to occupy our thoughts. It can be really easy to go through the 10 steps and then you're like, get into a shame cycle, as Brené Brown likes to talk about. You focus on all the things that you've done wrong, all the things in the past, and you just get stuck there. The important point is to identify this personal inventory. When you were wrong, you promptly admitted it, and then you're going to move on. You're going to let it go. If you did something that you're ashamed about or you're unhappy about, no matter if it was 10 years ago, a year ago, yesterday, we can't go back and change time. It's impossible. We can make it amends, and we could show others and show ourselves we could change our behaviors, and that is a process. It takes time. It's not a one and done. It's not flicking a light switch and suddenly light is on and everything's magical and we're never going to fall back into unhealthy behavior patterns again. That's unrealistic. And I think when we know that it's unrealistic, then we have ground to be able to build a solid foundation on, so that brick by brick, day by day, hour by hour, we can move forward in a positive way. And when things start slipping and the ground beneath us starts shifting, we could quickly say, hey, I'm having an issue here. What is it? Identify it, fix where the path that we're on, and then move onward in a positive fashion. So again, I do hope that this episode has been helpful for you. I think going back through the 12 steps, I find it really helpful for me. And I hope that those of you, who are listening, you find it helpful for you. Again, I do want to thank out. There are 2 people in the last couple weeks who have reached out and made some donations to keep the podcast going. I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you. It literally is keeping things, keeping the lights on, keeping things going. Thank you for that. I sincerely appreciate that. Again, without your support, I wouldn't be here. It is what it is. So thank you, and I hope that this episode has been helpful. And as always, please be easy on yourself and be well.